This is the course Critical and Clinical. The title is a bit, it's a bit heavy, or at least might be not very clear. So, for those who know a little bit Deleuze, the French philosopher, Deleuze has a book which is not a book, it's a collected essay kind of book, meaning they collected a number of his essays on literature mainly. And in this book, Deleuze continues what he began with Sacer-Masoch, his book on masochism, if you know about it. And in Sacer-Masoch, Deleuze says that art, in this case literature, meaning artistic practices in general, they can inform us on clinical situations, meaning madness, mental illness, schizophrenia, stuff like that. As you know, Masoch gave his name to disease, at least psychoanalysts consider that this is a disease. If you're a masochist, they think you're not very normal. And Saad gave his name to another disease, which is sadism. So you have the sadist anal complex, and you have a sadomasochism for someone like Freud, and the Freudian is a complex, meaning you are sadomasochistic. They think it comes together. And in his book, Sacer-Masoch, Deleuze he really shows that actually the literary production, writing books and kind of imaginary scenarios about these sexual practices, they inform us about the nature of what is going on in a way that psychoanalytical approaches sometimes they don't get it. So you can complement, Deleuze used to think in the beginning, you can really like make a complementary you can help psychoanalysis by providing them with this artistic critical approach. So this is the critical part. So the critique, or when you do a criticism of the arts, critique, can help the clinique, meaning you are in a clinic and you're seeing a doctor. So critique and clinique are this kind of two polarities for understanding a real, which is, in this case, sadomasochism, let's say. I hope this is clear. Now, in Critique and Clinique, he collects a number of literary essays by many writers. And he tries to show how these literary practices inform us about the psyche and its workings. So this is the first, if you want, clarification of the title, Critique and Clinique. Now, these essays, hence they point towards, these critical essays, they point towards a clinical situation. You can read this book as the double of another book. Critique and Clinique is the alter ego of another book by Deleuze, this time a book written by him as a book, which is Foucault. It's almost at the same time. Deleuze wrote a book called Foucault, where he really systematizes Foucault. Foucault is a quite incredible author, very prolific. He talked about many things, but in this book, Deleuze tries to systematize Foucault. I hope you know Foucault. He's a French philosopher, very well known about politics and power and stuff like that. He's known really for his conception of history, politics, and power. But Foucault, again, has a double approach. So you have a double approach in Deleuze and a double approach in Foucault. The double approach in Foucault is that if you look at his books, you have two kind of books. You have two series. You have books on politics, history of madness, history of sexuality, the birth of the clinic, the archaeology of knowledge. All of these books are really like historical in their nature. Historical meaning he really makes a kind of conceptual history. He tries to show us what we need to look at in a historical epoch. So this is the first series. The second series is about books, usually short books or articles or essays on the arts. And he wrote extensively on literature and art. He has Ceci n'est pas une pipe, this is not the Magritte thing, commenting on the relation between what we say and what we see in the arts. He has a collection of conference which was retranscribed, which is on Manet. I advise you to read this one, it's really good. You have a book on Roussel, the writer, which was an inspiration for the surrealists. And he has essays on Sade and essays on many literary figures and artists, Manet, Monet, etc. So he really wrote a lot on the arts. So you have these two packs again, a kind of, in quote, real package, which is history, etc., and a kind of critical assessment of works of art. Now, the whole goal of this course is to do the relation critique and clinique. Clinique, you can replace it with reality in general, and critique with art in general. And this is really the relations that interest us in here, meaning how to situate works of art in the real, but also how to show that the real is, in a way, already functioning like a work of art. You have this relation that I would like to clarify. So this course, if you want to wonder what it can help you for, or how does it relate to a kind of artistic practice in general, I propose it, at least for those who wish to use it, as a general contextualization of the works of art. There's another course which is the Deleuze cinema course, which is more on what are images in themselves. This course really works on situating the images in a broader context to see that actually image production, be it books like literature, paintings, sculptures, movies, videos, whatever you do, including philosophy, as we will see, all of these practices which are called creative to some extent, we will see that actually they are really inscribed in their environment, if we can call it like that, in a kind of intellectual environment. And I'll try to show here how much they are really like heavily inscribed in these environments, which means that however creative you are, you will see that you can't get out of an epoch, and hence we need to characterize the visual kind of visual and intellectual functioning of an epoch, and we'll see how people inscribe themselves in these visual forms and intellectual forms. And you will have a division between those who inscribe themselves in the support of these visual forms that will support the power in place, and those who will try to, while still inscribing the same forms, to oppose the power in place. So this, if you want, the skeleton of the course. So in this course, I will try to insist many times on an art or an image production that support power. Power means those in place. So let's say today, if you support capitalism, you would be producing images that will reinforce, support, and serve, let's say, capitalism. If you do advertisement for some companies, you could be like supporting these companies by producing a very specific type of image. And on the other hand, you will have another line of characters that will try to oppose the powers in place. But you will see that if you oppose or support, you are captured in visual and intellectual and decibel, meaning ways of speaking. And we'll try to characterize these. To do that, we'll cover three epochs: the sovereign epoch, the disciplinary epoch, and the controlled societies, meaning what we know today as electronic, the electronic, algorithmic, Facebook and stuff like that, where we are today. So you have this kind of history that spans over these three major epochs. The first one, the sovereign regime, is what is known as l'Ancien Régime. L'Ancien Régime is Louis XV, Louis XVI, XIV. You know, it's an epoch that begins after the Renaissance and ends with the French Revolution. It's a short epoch, but it's a very important epoch. It's what Foucault calls the classical age. The second epoch is the disciplinary epoch, which begins with the French Revolution and ends with the Second World War. So 150 years, around 150 years. It ends with the Nazis' disaster. And then you have the new epoch, which is, the Marshall Plan, and then the rise of finance, global market, electronic devices, and until today, what you call controlled societies. Now, to begin with the first epoch, really is what you call the sovereign epoch, the sovereignty. Now, what is sovereignty? Sovereignty is a power regime. Power regime is when someone governs someone. You have power regimes all over the place. Even in little schools, you have power regimes where the professors try to maintain order or govern students. In a hospital, you have power regimes because you need to manage the patients. So you have power regimes, and on the global scale, on the national scale, let's say, the power really as it is the government and the people. This is, if you want, the basic divide when you want to understand the power regime. But you see that power regimes are much more diffuse than that. But just to begin with, you need to get this idea that power is when someone makes someone do something. This is power. It is when I make you make something the way I want you to make it. This is power. You see, power is not really violence or I put a gun in your hand. Power is going to induce you to do something. It's la conduite de la conduite des hommes. Conduire, this is a sentence by Foucault, I'm going to conduct your conduct. I'm going to make you behave in a certain way. And this is really power. So power is, you need to understand, I'm going to put in place some rules, some things, some architectural organizations. And because of these things that are put in place, you start behaving in a way. And sometimes even you will want to behave in this way, meaning you will want to behave the way we've set your behavior to be. I will give you a very simple example that Foucault gives many times. If we lower the taxes on babies, of course you prefer to have babies than to pay taxes, you make more babies. This is a power procedure. You see how it's not that anyone is threatening you. We encourage, we tell you either taxes or babies. You pick. Some people will pick taxes, but usually you end up picking making children. Okay, so in the first configuration of power, you have these societies called the sovereign power. Sovereign power, if you want to situate it historically, you can Google it and look at it. The aim of this course is not for you to become historians or anything like that, but you need to be able to feel, when you look at something, what type of power it is. Because these powers are forms, they're not historically assignable, even though sometimes in some historical epochs, they take an expansion. So if you take the sovereign regime when it was really like at its peak, it's the l'Ancien Régime. L'Ancien Régime is, if you want, historically, is the Louis family in France, Louis XIV, XV, etc. And you have the Habsburg family. And you have the Philip dynasty, Le Roi Philippe in Spain and stuff like that. And all of these families are intermingled and stuff like that. This is really the peak of these monarchies. This is really sovereign power at its best. The Habsburg governed for 400 years. The Louis, via many descendants, it's like maybe 200 years. So you have these really like huge families that used to own and govern practically everything. You know, Velasquez says, I am the state. He's really like the state. It's his bon vouloir. If he's happy, everyone is happy. If he's not happy, no one is happy. This is really like the figure of Le Roi Soleil, like he's like the pinnacle. All the power is concentrated in him. This is sovereign power. Now, sovereign power's major characteristic is what? Is that you have these families which used to be considered to have a special blood. Used to say, yeah, the Louis family, they have blue blood, and these other families are divine in a way, or they have pure lineages of blood, which makes them look quite not very pretty sometimes because of the consanguine kind of marriages they used to have. So at the end, you had really like physical problems because they were a bit deformed because of this never-ending interfamilial marriages. As you know, it's not very good for your genetics. But anyways, they used to really consider that they are a pure blood. And you, as a people, you don't have the right to be part of that caste, of that dynasty that governs the people. So the main trait that you want to detect in a sovereign power is that you have a division between the ruling class and the ruled class. You as a ruled class, you can't get up there. And this comes from the Middle Ages kind of historical dynamics where you had the power was in the hand of what you call the clergy and the armed nobility, which mutated with time towards a power in the hands of the armed nobility more than the clergy. But you always had this kind of tension between the Pope kind of power and the royalties in Europe. And at the end, meaning in l'Ancien Régime, it was more in the hand of the nobility, that is a military nobility, and not in the hands of the people. Now, just for you to know, the nobility is not the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are merchants. Just to get the basic class structures, you have nobility, where you have the spiritual nobility, clergy, priests, the men of God, and you have the military nobility. In the Middle Ages, at one point, they were mixed together, the military and the clergy. In the Crusade, for example, you had the military clergy in the Crusade. And the Pope always had an army until recently, meaning it was a military spiritual power. Now, whatever is the case is that now you have this kind of structure, if you take France, where you have really a kind of concentration of power in the hand of this militarized nobility. And they need to govern a body, a mass, where you have peasants, laymen, including the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are down. You see, since 1720 till the French Revolution, the whole problem is how the bourgeoisie is going to take power from the nobility. This is where we are. So it's how the bourgeoisie is going to be able to really like put aside the clergy's spiritual power and the nobilty's mundane or earthly power. 1720 till the French Revolution. After the French Revolution, it's the power of the bourgeoisie. This is when we move into the disciplinary society. There's a cut, and it's a new configuration of power. You're not anymore under the rule of a kind of foreign body, but now it's the body that governs itself. This is what you call democracy. We'll see that later. Now, if you take the monarchies, it's a power that is from the outside. Because you are a military power, and who do you have in your face? These people that you want to subjugate. Now, how do you subjugate them? You subjugate them by force, obviously. I mean, you want something from this mass. What do you want from them? You want from them money and goods and services. As usual, the governing class, what does it want from the governed class? They want obedience in order to get money, services, and exploitation today, etc. So this is in this structure. The relation is a relation of force, and the type of extraction of the surplus, as we say, the way to get the money is usually made by taxation. The tax We'll not go into these details, but the tax is really something related to the imperial, to the imperium, to the imperial power, meaning where you have a kind of dynasty extracting from a mass. This is what you call a tax. You will see that it's very different in the bourgeoisie, where you have not really taxation, but you'll have exploitation, which is quite different. We'll see this in time. Now, you have taxation, you have this kind of extraction from the mass. You extract from the mass an amount of money. Sometimes the extraction can be a lot. Sometimes you can extract a lot. This is when you have riots. You have riots when the mass is not very happy in relation to the section of the money they have to give. I don't know if you've seen Robin Hood. You've seen Robin Hood. You know Robin Hood.
The anime?
Huh?
The animation?
You have animations, books, movies. You have one with, I forgot his name, the last one, the last Hollywood Robin Hood. You've seen it? Was that bad actor, you know? Anyway, so you have Robin Hood, the character.
Oh, Will Ferrell.
Huh?
Will Ferrell?
I know another one. He was very famous at a point. The guy who did Dancing with the Wolves, you know? Okay, anyway, so you have this Robin Hood thing. You see how Robin Hood it is. You have the Sherlock kind of governor, which is, he represents the king, so he has power over the lands, and he wants to extract taxes. And Robin Hood, what does he do? He insurrects against the tax extraction. This is when he goes to the forest, he builds an army, and he confronts the king's tax wizard or the police that wants to extract taxes. See, this is the situation. You have this kind of, I'm a power, I want to extract from the mass. Please keep it quiet if you can. So you want to extract from the mass, and this extraction is usually achieved by force. You have to use force in order to extract the money. So you can see that in this kind of atmosphere, the relation. I give you another. If you take the Lebanese Civil War, the Lebanese Civil War, we had a sovereign epoch. During the war, the militias used to exercise a sovereign power over the neighborhoods because they were an external body. So how did they exercise their power? By terror. I don't know. Maybe if you remember these things, or you read about them, it's really like the militias used to first extract. Like he used to come in your shop and tell you, "Give me some money because we need it. We're protecting you, and you have to pay." And he has his gun on his side, and if you don't pay, he beats you. Okay, so and I don't know if you've seen images from the Lebanese war, but they used to hang people on the light posts. And they used to drag people behind them with the cars. Now, why they do that? Because it's not they turned savages all of a sudden. It's not that they're not savages. This is not the point. The thing is that when you have a structure of power where the power is external to the mass, you have to become a savage, meaning you have to show the mass that you are bloodthirsty, super powerful, and you will not stop in the face of anything if anyone is going to not to obey this kind of rule. You have this a lot in civil wars, and not only in Lebanon, practically all over the place. When you have an external body, he exercises his power by terror. And this was really, if you want, the first image to understand this kind of power. You take the juridical system under l'Ancien Régime. If you take the juridical system, it's just the system that deals with crime, punishment, all of these things. The juridical system itself was a machine whose main role, says Foucault, the main role of this machine consisted in showing the overpower of the king. So if you take the scenery around the 1720s, 1715s, literally, you can read the references of Foucault. Now I'm referring to his book, Surveiller et Punir, meaning Discipline and Punish. You can read it there. You walk in the street and you have scaffolds. Each 100, 200 meters you have a scaffold. And on it, you see really the people that we tortured the last day, and they're still hanging there. And you see really these scenes of terror a bit all over the place. And not only that, the people were conveyed to come and witness the torturing of the criminal. Now, usually torture, really like, main goal for Foucault is, of course, to set an example, but this is not the main goal. The main goal is to show you how the governing class, meaning these pure-blooded aristocrats, they are overpowered. They are really like supermen. They have an overpower over you, meaning over the normal people. And the ritual of justice consisted in tearing the criminal apart, really like putting him into pieces. Damien was one of these last criminals to be condemned by torture, meaning on a public space in front of everyone, and he was tortured to death. So I read you here the sentence and the torturing scene of Damien. So it's here. Taken and conveyed in a cart, wearing nothing but a shirt, holding a torch of burning wax, weighing 2 pounds. Then, in the said cart, to the Place de Grève, where on a scaffold that will be erected there, the flesh will be torn from his breasts, arms, thighs, and calves, with red-hot pincers, his right hand holding the knife with which he committed the said parricide, burned with sulfur, and on those places where the flesh will be torn away, cooled molten lead, boiling oil, burning resin, wax, and sulfur melted together, and then his body drawn and quartered by 4 horses, and his limbs and body consumed by fire, reduced to ashes, and his ashes thrown to the 4 winds. So this is really the sentence. The sentence is that you take this guy who killed his father, you burn his hands, you make him drink wax and resin and boiling oil, you open him, you then quarter him with horses. You bring 4 horses to put him into pieces. This is a juridical sentence. It's not like today, like 10 years of prison with and you have to work and stuff like that. Now this is the execution. What happened really on the scaffold? What happened really is that the sulfur was lit, but the flame was so poor that only the top skin of the hand was burned, and that only slightly. Then the executioner, his sleeves rolled up, took the steel pincer, which had been especially made for the occasion, and which were about 1.5 feet long, and pulled first at the calf of the right leg, then at the thigh, and from there at the 2 fleshy parts of the right arm, then at the breasts. Though a strong, sturdy fellow, this executioner found it so difficult to tear away the pieces of flesh that he set about the same spot 2 or 3 times, twisting the pincers as he did so, and what he took away formed at each part a wound about the size of a 6-pound crown piece. Okay, so here you see the scene where the butcher is trying to tear pieces of flesh out of Damien, and this is the way it goes. Then there is a long scene describing how the horses were trying to pull him apart, and they weren't able to tear him into pieces cleanly, so they had to cut the ligaments, and after cutting the ligaments, the horses were able to tear him apart, and then they opened him, they took out his guts, etc., etc. So you see, it's very bloody, it's very gore, as we say today, it's very graphic. So this is how you do justice. You do justice like that, and really then the guys remain there, hanging for, let's say, a week or 2, and sometimes even more. The whole population sees that. Now, you see here, really, the scene is this kind of what Foucault calls l'éclat des supplices. L'éclat des supplices, it's very badly translated. They didn't translate it in English. The chapter wasn't translated into l'éclat des supplices. It was translated, but they didn't translate éclat. And l'éclat du supplice is really this kind of justice that needs to be éclatante. Éclatante meaning spectacular. L'éclat is something where you see something and it just shines in your face. This is l'éclat. Usually, les éclats de lumière, it's like something that irradiates. It's flashy. L'éclat du supplice is that. And Foucault really chose this title very, very carefully because the whole issue is in l'éclat, not in les supplices. The English translations, they focus on le supplice, while the whole problem of Foucault is to show that the whole issue is to show you that there's a form of justice whose form of light is to shine through, is to be éclatant, is to really like blind you, like you are blinded by this superpower. Now, see, this is a form of light. This is like what we are going to deal with extensively. Foucault is, I think, one of the first to theorize something like a form of light. He's not saying, light, physical light, theory of colors. No, he's saying there's a form of light. Meaning, if you are in a certain power, you will use certain visuals in order to convey that power. And you see, this is conceptual. It's not that the light now changed. It's the same light. You have a scaffold, you have the sunlight, and then you have torture. But Foucault says if you are careful when looking, you see that when you look, you are filled with these images. You are really like, you have this kind of impact on you, which is like a sun blinding you. It's so strong visually that it blinds you. This is the form of l'éclat. So this form of light of l'éclat, or radiance, when Weekend says, je suis le roi soleil, it's not haphazard. Le roi soleil is really like, le soleil is l'éclat. You have one source of light, which is the sun, which is the king, and this sun is really going to shine on everything else. And if you look at the sun, it's blinding. So the other side of l'éclat is the blinding light. You have these two sides. You have a side which is extremely enlightened, or it gives you light, which is a very strong light. And the other side of it is this kind of absolute darkness, a point of a blind spot that you cannot see because it's so luminous that you can't see anymore. So the form of light that characterizes this epoch, as we will see, is this blinding light, or light as radiance, or if you want an image, the sun at noon. Really like the sun at noon, that is irradiating in all its strength, where you are blinded by the light, but also it's the focal point of the whole visual world. It's what makes everything visible, but it itself remains invisible. It's what you cannot sustain with your gaze, but that which allows you to gaze. This is, if you want, the form we are moving in. Its counterpart is absolute darkness. It's really like something that you cannot see, something that remains in darkness and confined, absolutely obscure. If you want, these are the two sides. If you look at this image, it's exactly like that. You have, this is l'éclat, like blinding manifestation of power, and this is la question. This is really like the judgment. Judgment, execution, they stand towards each other in the relation of a dark, confined space. So you have a dark, confined space here, where no one knows what is really going on. And then you have l'éclat du supplice. Now, why no one really knows what is going on in here? Because, really, when it comes to the juridical investigation, it's not like today, it must be scientific with DNA and stuff like that. The juridical investigation back then consisted in a very, very obscure procedure, which is what you used to call the calculus of proofs. What is the calculus of proofs? It's like an arithmetic of proofs that only the judges of the king understand. So you have points and stuff like that. And no one understood how you are guilty or not guilty. Just to give you an example, if we suspect you of a crime, you're already guilty. So they come, they arrest you. You don't know why. If your neighbor says, he worships Satan. They send troops to your house, they capture you. Once they capture you, they submit you to the question. Now, what is the question? The question is an ordeal situation, meaning I'm going to torture you bit by bit. If you confess, we say, okay, you go to prison, then we chop you into pieces, and then we see when you are going to confess. So the logic behind it is that if you are really in your right and believing in God and righteousness and stuff like that, you will not confess. And here we are going to submit you to torture until either you confess or you don't confess. Now, the game is like that. If you're able to endure torture and you don't confess, you are free. If you confess under torture, well, it means that you're not, empowered by righteousness and God, then you are guilty, and hence we need to chop you into pieces. Now, when you are on the scaffold, if while chopping you into pieces, you remain alive or something happened, as the guy, something happens where he's unable to kill you, you are set free because we consider that this is the grace of God. So you see, it's a kind of challenge. It's a kind of justice by ordeal. And this is a very old form of justice. If you take Sulaiman, the prophet, Sulaiman al-Hakim, Salmon, it's this kind of judge. Let's chop the baby in half. The mother says, oh no, please don't chop him in half. And this is when you know who is righteous or not. So it's a very old way of governance and doing justice, but in here you have this kind of obscurity around the interrogation. You have an obscurity around the interrogation, and the interrogation itself is made by torture. So this is, if you want here some torturing thing, this is what you call la roue. La roue is that we attach you to a wheel, we turn the wheel, and while turning the wheel, they hit you with baseball bats, which breaks your limbs. It breaks your limbs. And after all, you see the guy hanging from la roue. Now, this is what you call not les stoppades. This one is one where we put your feet in two pieces of wood and we wrap them with papyrus, which is watered, and then we put you next to the fire. And when the papyrus dries, the pieces of wood start closing on your tibia, and it's very, very painful. Just to give you, these are very important for you to see. You'll see why very soon. These are the technologies of power, which means back then to govern, you needed this kind of thing. 1 second. I was saying that back then to govern you need this kind of gadgets. I've lowered it a bit. The AC, no? Okay. So for the AC, I just. So back then to govern you need this kind of gadgets. Today to govern you need that. Just for you to understand that this cell phone is the equivalent of this poire. You see, this is the poire. The poire is what this thing you put it in your mouth, and by turning this screw here, it opens inside your mouth and it blows your mouth open. This is what you call the 9 cats whip. You have little crutches here that tears you apart, and this is l'écartèlement. This is when the tearing apart, the horses. So these are really like torture gadgets or techniques. And here you have you have more if you want. This is the Iron Maiden, not Iron Maiden's group, but the Iron Maiden. Here you put you in and we close on you the thing, and we hear you scream from within. These are a bit different. This is the poire, Iron Maiden, the cats. Okay, so practically these are the thing. This is how it looks, just for you to see. You see, this is a kind of image of these torture scenes that used to happen really in the city. Like it was the practice of justice every day. Okay, so this is the blocage, you call it, your legs. So when you confess, you are guilty, and we can torture. Now, so I'll be getting this kind of two sides of this figure of light. You have le cachot, or the cave where we submit you to torture in obscurity for you to confess. And confession is a kind of luminous counterpart for the torture procedure. And then we take you out and we torture you in full light for everyone to see the l'éclat of the power of the king. Really, it's l'éclat of the power of the king. Now, this is when it comes to power. I hope this is clear. You as a king, as an administration, you need to manifest yourself in this form, which is, I am le roi soleil, éclatant, incredible, blinding. Now, I just want you to know that if you are a criminal, like Cartouche or Mandarin or Robin Hood, you have to do the same. So if you take Cartouche, I don't know if you know Cartouche, there's a movie with Belmondo and Sophia Loren, which was a funny movie with costumes and stuff like that. And this is if you really want to see what éclat is. Cartouche is a character which is very éclatant, very fascinating, very spectacular. Why is he very spectacular? Because he's a thief. Of course, he's one of these thieves which are from that time. From that time, the thieves were chiefs of army, just for you to know. Criminality was not individual criminality. You had, for example, like Robin Hood. Robin Hood, it's not that he's a criminal alone. He has an army, and he confronts the armies and of the king. You have this kind of confrontation. So the outlaws really inhabit the woods and the suburbs, and they have their hideouts, etc. And they attack those in power, which is the aristocracy. You know this with the pirate movies. The pirates are really like a little army who is set loose, and they attack, let's say, the British army, and you have this kind of confrontation. Now, Cartouche is one of these army of bandits leader, and he's a bit like Robin Hood. He steals from the rich to give to the poor. He makes gags, and he's like dancing in this kind of game. Just to give you an anecdote, for example, one time Cartouche, there was a guy who was indebted, so he went to the bank and he paid the debt of this poor man. And then when the banker came out with the money, he found him on the corner of the street and he robbed the money again from him. So he paid the debts and he got the money. So it's this kind of character which is quite amusing and spectacular. Now, I will read you a part of Cartouche, which is a poem written by Grandval. Grandval is a poet from that century, where Grandval describes Cartouche. I want you to notice the form of that. So it goes like that. I read it in French. You all understand French, more or less? Okay, so I read it in French. So, insensés qui se fient aux grandeurs de la terre. Leur éclat, le plus beau n'a que l'éclat du verre. Nous voyons les pervers quelquefois triomphants. Cet apparent bonheur ne peut durer longtemps. On fuit en vain du ciel les arrêts légitimes. Tôt ou tard, on reçoit la peine de ses crimes. Cartouche, ce grand chef, naguère si content, Cartouche en va fournir un exemple éclatant. Le temps approche enfin qu'un cruel coup de foudre doit réduire en un jour tant de lauriers en poudre. On le tire un matin de son noir bastillon pour subir les tourments d'une âpre question. Il souffre sans parler les plus rudes supplices, plutôt que d'accuser aucun de ses complices. Déjà le peuple en foule à la place attirée voit de son châtiment l'appareil préparé. Cartouche sur ses gens fondant son espérance, entend sans se troubler prononcer sa sentence. Il sort de la prison, se montre, paf et fend les flots tumultueux du peuple qui l'attend. Mais pourrais-je nombrer les foules accourues que le vaste Paris dégorgea de ses rues? Combien de gens ont vu venir de toutes parts, confondre sur lui seul leurs avides regards. Comme il ne doutoit point qu'on ne vint à son aide, il attend constamment cet unique remède. Mais regardant en vain d'un et d'autre côté, qu'est devenu, dit-il, l'honneur, la probité, quoi de quelque côté que je tourne la vue, la foi de tous les cœurs est pour moi disparue. Okay, so I hope you got the story. You have this cartouche, this character, and they bring him out of his cell. They submit him to torture. He doesn't denounce his accomplices in crime, meaning the army of the criminal, and then they take him to the scaffold, and until then he doesn't confess. Then when he sees that no one came to help him from his army, this is when he goes back to the scaffold and he confesses, and then you have the scene of torture of Cartouche. Now what I read you this part just for you to notice les éclats et les éclatants. Now you see, Cartouche is like a character which is quite spectacular because the way he was captured is a spectacular story. You know, Cartouche, how did he get captured? He stole the money of the taxes of the king during the day, so they were able to really steal the taxes. They were transporting the taxes from a village to Paris, and he was able to intercept the kind of wagon and steal the taxes. And hence, of course, the whole Paris is looking for him because they know that it's Cartouche who stole the taxes. Of course, Cartouche made sure to let everyone know that he stole the money of the king. And all the soldiers of the king are roaming Paris to capture Cartouche. So that night, he has a rendezvous with his mistress, which is kind of from the nobility, aristocracy kind of lady, and he decides to go the same day to his rendezvous with his mistress, and his wife tells him, no, you have to stay, you have to hide today, it's not the time to go to your mistress, but he doesn't care. He says, you know, I'm Cartouche, and he goes to his mistress, and he's able to, in the story, he's able by climbing on the rooftops and running behind the guards, etc., to sneak in the home of the mistress. And when the mistress discovers him in her bed, and they are, you know, having their love affair, etc., the mistress says that she feels like having champagne, and Cartouche decides to go and get her champagne. He's not just satisfied with sneaking around. And while he's going to buy his champagne bottle to his mistress, this is when they arrest him and he ends up in jail. So I hope you're getting the character. The character is really this kind of flamboyant character. You know, the gesture. I don't know if you've seen these movies. Les Mousquetaires, they're very flamboyant. So even in the gesture, you do this and that. And so you are like incredible. You know these things. And you have these costumes that come here to underline each gesture you make. You know, the hat, the sword, and even the way they do it with their feet. And all of that is really éclatant. I'm telling you that this is a visual mode, which means that for you to be visible during the classical age, you have to be éclatant. This is, if you want to say, the moral of the story. Is bottom line, if you're not éclatant, you're invisible, meaning we don't consider you to be to exist visually. if you do something very minimal and nice and well confined, you don't exist. This is why if you read the poetry and if you look at paintings, architecture, and even the life of these men and women, it's a life which is very spectacular. This is what you call l'éclat. L'éclat is this kind of, it fills your eyes with a lot of artifice.
Like manière and
Yeah, it's maniéré, yeah. It's like really like, but maniéré in a peak of, I put it in your eyes. Really, I want to impress. And really, like, watch these bad movies. It's okay. You can watch, like, Cartouche with Belmondo. So Belmondo is very éclatant. He's really éclatant. You see, like, he's charismatic, charming, incredible, he's courageous, this kind of thing. So, and of course, Cardinal is also éclatant, meaning she's very attractive, spectacular, etc. And you have these two characters that are like that. So, what I'm trying to say is that this is what you call a regime of sight. It's a regime of perception. For this to be visible, it needs to reach a pinnacle of it needs to be a pinnacle of inside the visual field. So you have other, you have Claude Duval and Mandarin, which are also thieves, which are incredible, which are éclatants. Just for you to tell you a bit context, today WikiLeaks would be the equivalent of a Mandarin or of a Cartouche. WikiLeaks, Assange guy that is in prison now. It's a different form of criminality. Just for you to see that the atmosphere changed. It's not anymore éclat, it's more computers, codes, and breaking inside the secret emails of Clinton and this kind of people of power. And if you take the disciplinary area, you have people like Arsène Lupin, Jack the Ripper. This is the profile of the bandit, of the criminal. You see, there's a change in how to be a criminal over time. It's not the same. So I hope you see that this is what now this kind of literature that I've just told you about Cartouche. This is what you call la littérature noire. Littérature noire. It has it begins. I'm sure there's before, but for us, you have this beginning in l'Ancien Régime. And this kind of poems that used to sing the exploits of the bandits and the criminals, one of its more popular forms was la feuille volante, meaning they used to write them on pieces of paper, hastily printed, and distribute them around the scaffold or after the killing, where you really sing the prowess of the criminal. Now, you see, how you see that this is a type of literature that fits in the form of life. It's not only that the literature fits in, even the guy himself, Cartouche, is in reality éclatant. Now, the counterpart of that is what you call the moralizing literature. This is a literature with power. If you want today, you have left and right, de gauche and droite. Droite is you are with power, left you are more or less against power, or you're against power and you want to take power, but usually you are against. As if you want the polarity with against power. If you take you have what you call in France la bibliothèque bleue. La bibliothèque bleue was moralizing, like they torture the criminal, and when the criminal he's about to die, he thanks the king and he thanks God because in torture he rediscovered his moral self and he confesses and he abdicates and abjures and all of these things. So he really recognized that after all torture was good for him. This is, if you want, the right side of the story. Which is like they recognize that after all it's good. So here I read you a bit of this Bibliothèque Bleue. So the editorial note of La Bibliothèque Bleue, this way if you read editorials you know where you are, if you want to publish or things like that. The editorial note of the Bibliothèque Bleue is that la Bibliothèque Bleue jamais ne renferme aucune impureté ni rien de contraire aux lois sacrées de la morale et de la religion, Toujours le crime est puni, la vertu récompense. This is the editorial, no? And here we tell you stories where the criminals always end up paying for his crimes. This is a type of discourse that la bibliothèque bleue is going to put in the mouth of the criminals. So you have a criminal, in this case it's a woman, and they're going to say what she said when she was about to die in the bibliothèque bleue, in the text that they distribute. Père et mère qui m'entendez, gardez et enseignez bien à vos enfants. J'ai été dans mon enfance menteuse et fainéante. J'ai commencé par voler un petit couteau de 6 liards. Après, j'ai volé des colporteurs, des marchands de bœuf. Enfin, j'ai commandé une bande de voleurs. Et voici pourquoi je suis ici. Redites cela à vos enfants et que ceci au moins leur serve d'exemple. Okay, you see now the tone of this kind of moralizing literature. So you have this other side of how to tell that story. So if you take now a piece of architecture, take like an architectural piece like Versailles. You know Versailles. Okay, the image is not very good here, but this is a plan of Versailles. I don't know if you see it. This is a perspective. You have them in the note. So you see here, you see that little thing here? This is the Palais de Versailles. This tiny thing here. And all of that is the Versailles garden. And you know, this palace is huge, the Palais de Versailles. And in the middle here, in the middle of the Palais de Versailles, first floor, if I remember well, you have the room of the king. And you see that this garden, all the lines, all of them, they guide you to the room of the king, which is here. Okay? So you have this kind of point. It's a point that doesn't see, but that is seen. This is crucial. Why it's crucial? Because we usually think that you look at it and you say, okay, it looks like that. It means, if you look at that, all these lines converging towards the room of Versailles, you think it's like, okay, I'll have to jump these. You think it's like, you think it's like the panopticon. You think it's like the. If you look at that, you think it's like.
The panopticon came later, no? Or
Yeah, it comes later, exactly.
And it's like an inversed movement of seeing.
Exactly. But the problem is that they look the same. This is what I would like to show you. I think it's here. It's not here, of course. So I'll go right here. It looks like that. You see, the wheel is not working. So it looks like that. This is the Salinière de Ledoux. You see, Versailles looks like that, but it's not like that. Right. Now, I'm insisting on that. Why? Because you see, visually they look the same. Tamiya, look, the power is here and everyone is looking at it. Well, no. In this case, it's actually the power looking at you and not you looking at the power. So, yeah, but we see the power too. Yeah, but this is not what counts. What counts is that Versailles, the scale is so big. Yeah, Versailles is this big and the gardens are like huge around Versailles. But all the alleys of Versailles point towards a tiny dot, which is the room of the king. Now you see here there's an inverse relation of the gaze. Inverse relation of the gaze, meaning now it's not that you look at power, it's power who looks at you. I'm insisting on that just for you to tell you that when we talk about regimes of perceptions, we're talking about the power to see, meaning the way to see, and not about just what seems to be a visual form. So this is a way of seeing where the only focal point of the whole visual field is the palace itself. And now Colbert used to conceive that palace as an exhibition room. If you read a little bit about Versailles, Colbert, which is the minister of Louis XV, he thought that we're going to build a palace which would be so spectacular, éclat, that is going to impress so much the ambassadors of the other country, and is going to display the power of France by doing incredible works of art, furniture, banquets, singing, Versailles, the feasts, etc., etc. And all of that aim was to impress Europe by having this kind of incredible place that is going to fill the eyes of whoever visits that place. Now, but of course, this place has a dark spot, which is the room of the king. The room of the king, no one sees it, and everyone wonders if the king is there or not there. This is, if you want, its obscure counterpart. And the room of the king is, of course, the focal point of all the gossips, speculations, who are his mistresses and stuff like that. And you have all the intrigues of the court around the king and his mistresses, etc., etc., which is the black point of this organization, which is the royal court. If you want another kind of symmetry between these two polarities of this light, which is l'éclat des lumières, l'éclat du soleil, and the darkness of the dark counterpart of that éclat, you have the story of the Iron Mask. You know that story, the Iron Mask? It seems that one of the brothers of Louis XV resembled him a lot, like he was like a copy of him. And of course, the face of Louis XV is engraved on all the golden coins, his face, his profile. And he thought that if his brother is to be confused with him, it's a problem when it comes to his power. And he decided to cover his face with an iron mask, with these two slots like that. And the iron mask is the counterpart of this shiny coin on which you have the face of Louis XV. Okay, so I hope you're getting this kind of... And this is really like a story that stems from within these visualities. Back then, l'éclat means you are everywhere as the only recognizable face, even though no one sees you really. And of course, your twin brother becomes a threat for you because of that kind of silly equation. So you have to make him wear a mask and put him in a cachot for the rest of his life, which gives some say that this is only a story. But I hope you see how the imaginary functions with these visual paradigms, with these visual organizations. Back then, it talks to the imagination to have a black, dark counterpart of the shiny, golden counterpart of the face of the king. And it gives you this kind of imaginary story about the Iron Mask and all the story around it in that regard.
When did the king used to wear this mask?
It's not the king. He suspected his brother to want to take power because he looks like him.
You're not talking about his fool.
Huh?
You're not talking about fools. The fool of the
No,
king.
not the fool. The fool is another story. I hope we'll cover it. We'll cover it soon when we talk about the madness in Foucault. The figure of the mad, the fool, and all of these organizations. But no, this is his brother. And he used to think that he's going to take his place because his face is really like him. And, he's paranoid. We'll see also that all kings which are sovereign are paranoid, obviously, because all the power are with them and they think that someone wants to kill them to take power. It's very simple, and which actually is right, because Louis XVI ended up with his head chopped off, meaning you govern, you repress, and at one point in time, everyone is fed up and they chop you into pieces. Gaddafi, it's the same. You have this kind of destiny of of the absolute monarch that goes, as Deleuze says, from being a living god into ending up in the latrines, into, into the les égouts, into the sewage system, after being chopped into pieces, massacred, etc. You have this kind of duality of the sovereign. Because, of course, it's not like, it's really like when you own all the power, people start hovering against you all kinds of resentment, and this resentment at one point explodes into this kind of reversed power, which is of the same kind. It's like they massacre you and your family, and everyone ends up chopped into pieces. If you want a movie where you see these things, like Question, etc., it's a bad movie, but you can see it anyway. It's about a painter. It's about... not Velasquez, it's the last foreman. It's about you've seen it, no? Maybe it's about Velasquez. No, Foreman made a movie on a painter. Anyway, I forgot. It will come back to me maybe. So it's a movie about a painter, but the movie is not about a painter, so it doesn't matter. The movie is about one of the models of the painter who was captured by the Inquisition. And you see how the Inquisition tortures her because they suspected that she is a Jew in the movie, because they see her not wanting to eat pork, so they took her to the cachot, and you see her life, how it got completely destroyed because of that moment. And you see the torture of that woman by the Inquisition. So, whatever is the case, so I hope now you're getting this kind of visual structure. Now, if you take painting, this is Las Meninas by Velasquez. And Velasquez is a royal painter. I mean, he's a painter of the court of Philip. Philip, which is the king of Spain, and he's allied with the Habsburg. So they say that when he was painting in his palace, Philip, the guy who employs him in a way, was the most powerful man in the world. So he was really like the king of Spain and practically of Austria, parts of Germany, and they were all married together, and you had this huge empire, which is really like incredible empire, under his dominion, under Philip. And Velasquez was included in the court of Philip when he was young, in his, I think, 20s something, and he really painted the royal family for the rest of his life. For something like 40 years, he painted Philip and his family. So practically, if you go to the Prado in Madrid, you have like the portraits of the royal families, of the court, of the king hunting, the king doing this, the king doing that, and Velasquez was the painter of that king. So Velasquez, he's part of this configuration. He's a painter of an absolute monarch, of absolute power. And here you see the modality of painting, which is what we call representation. Representation is not, I know we use it in a very vague way, but at least in this course, representation is always a representation of an excess. This is representation. Representation is never, it's not that I take a photo and it's a representation. Even if we can consider that the bottle is an excess to the image of the bottle, that's okay. But this is not the real meaning of representation. Well, the real meaning of representation stems from Plato. You can say Plato, the philosopher, is the guy who implemented this conception of representation, because the idea cannot be present. So I explain. For those who already heard the song, you have to be patient. So Plato, as you know, for him the real is the idea. What does it mean? If I tell you, does the cube have 6 faces? Of course it has 6 faces. Are these faces perpendicular? Yeah. Are the sides equal? Yeah. So you see what Plato says. What Plato says is that the idea is the object of universal judgment. So what does this sentence mean? It means that when you have a universal judgment, such as all cubes have 6 faces, this is a universal judgment because you have all and ta-ta-ta. You say all cubes have 6 faces. This is an all ta-ta-ta. This is a universal judgment. Of course, it's always true. Universal judgments are always true. So you say all men should be animal and rational. This is the definition of man. This is a universal judgment. This is the classical definition of man. Okay? Now, what I'm trying to say is that Plato says the idea is the object of the universal sentence. If I say the chair is blue, this chair is the object of the sentence, the chair is blue. Okay? You see, a sentence can have an arrow pointing towards its object. In this case, my sentence, the chair is blue, is pointing towards this chair. This sentence, on the other hand, all cubes have 6 faces. It's not pointing at this or that cube, it's pointing at the ideal cube. Okay? Oh, it's a very basic thing. So, if you want to know what is the ideal X, you want to know what is the ideal man, the ideal cube, the ideal sphere, the ideal palace, the ideal horse, whatever ideal you want to deal with, it's very simple. All the sentences which are universal describe the ideal. All the sentences which are particular don't describe the ideal. Now, if I say the cube is blue, is it always true? Obviously not, because not all cubes are blue. So if you say, even if this cube is blue and you say the cube is blue, this sentence doesn't describe ideality. It describes particularity, hence it's not always true. And if it's not always true, it's not objective. Right? This is the end of the philosophical parenthesis. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So you say all cubes have 6 faces. This is a sentence which is universal. It's describing an object, something which is outside of the sentence, which is the ideal cube. Now, Plato says, if you take, let's suppose this is a cube, do you know by degradation, so let's suppose this is not the ideal cube, but a copy of the ideal cube, do you see the 6 faces? No, you don't see the 6 faces. You see 3. At best. This is why Plato says our visual information, or what we get with our eyes, is less than what we get with our intellect. The intellect is superior to the senses, and only the intellect knows reality. Reality, the real reality, is only grasped by the intellect, not by the senses. This is why with our senses we can only represent reality and never get or see reality. I hope now you're getting from where you get this idea of representation. Representation is that the real cannot be given to you with your sense, in your sense organs. Even if you take the degraded real of the table in relation to the perception of the table. You know that this table is a copy of the ideal table, and the image you have of the table with your eyes is a copy of the ideal table. And if you take a photo of that, you're doing a copy of the copy of the copy. Now, you have this kind of gradation is really classical. You have a hierarchy of copies. So you have on top the idea, which is like a blinding thing because no one can see it, but it is the idea that makes all the other copies possible. I'll not go on all the either. Actually, it's only because you know this idea that you can see this as a table. It's the idea that allows you to see that this is a cube, because if you didn't know what is a cube, you would see, I don't know what, you would see a corner, but you wouldn't know that it's a cube. And actually, if you don't know that it's a cube, you can't turn around the cube. Let's suppose you are a cat or something like that. You don't turn around objects unless you want to eat them, so you're not turning around them. In that case, you want them, but they're here fixed, so you turn around them. You're not really turning around them, you are actually walking towards them. While a cat, if you see a cat walking around the table, I don't know, film him, call me, because animals do not do the tour of something. Which means animals do not explore, like, I want to see all the size of that. It functions by points. I want to get there, I want to eat that, and if it's fixed, they fix their point here and they start turning around until it's tired and they attack that point. So what I'm trying to tell you is that actually our classical perception is organized by these ideas. If I don't know that the building is a totality, which is coherent and of which I have an idea, which is a kind of 3D model in my mind, I won't be able to walk around and explore it. At least I need to have this as the horizon of my exploration. So you see the idea, if you want, functions like the king in relation to the visible. So here it's in relation to thought. You have this kind of idea. Eidos is light, just for you to, eidos is light. It shines, the idea shines, and it gives its light to these objects, and this is how you're able to see them. So what concerns us here is painting. You see, Velasquez was quite aware of this problem, which means that the representational painting has a fundamental issue, which is how to get the excess. How to get the excess. How to get this extra dimension which the painting cannot get. You know, things are 3D, to put it very prosaically. Things are 3D. When you paint them, you are in 2D. So how to get this kind of third dimension or fourth dimension, if you include time. So really how to be able to, with a picture which is less than the real, to get the real. So if you want the prosaic version. The real version is how to be able to express power, how to be able to express ideals such as beauty, goodness, divinity, all of these things. You know, one of the most simple way to include the third dimension, you know, is perspective and trompe-l'œil, and these tricks, visual tricks, where you feel that it's opening in a kind of perspective. Or if you go to the Chapel 16th, you see that when you stand there at that point, you see that the thing is opening up. So this was really a worry in representational art, which is how to get the excess. Now, Velasquez made this painting, which Foucault considers the culmination of representational art and the end of representational art. Like it is really the peak of all of these worries about the excessive dimension, the fact that painting cannot grasp the real, etc., etc. And Foucault says, if you look at this painting, it's a visual machine where Velasquez is really like staging the possibility to capture an excessive dimension. Because if you look at this painting, you have here Velasquez, which is outside of the painting. And of course, if he's outside of the painting, he can't be painting it. I hope you're getting the first paradox. Now, this is a painting which is going to embed many paradoxes in relation to this impossibility to paint reality, where reality is always in excess, but I'm going to paint the impossibility itself. So if you're here as a painter, you can't be painting the image you are painting. So you see, when the painter gets outside of the painting to look at the scene he's painting, and if he wants to paint himself painting, he cannot paint himself painting, because you know this thing. Can you paint yourself painting? Exactly, you can't. Because if you want to paint yourself painting, you need to paint yourself painting yourself painting. So it's very simple. So I put it very simple. You put a canvas and you want to paint exactly yourself painting. In that case, what should you paint also? You should paint also yourself with the mirror and the painting, and with the mirror and the painting, and this has an infinite kind of regression. I hope this is clear. So I repeat. So you put here you, mirror, canvas, mirror, and I want to do a self-portrait. But if I want to do it really accurately, what should I paint? Only me or me and the mirror? No, it's not that big. It's painting, mirror. You look at yourself. If you want to paint this situation, what should you paint? If you paint only what's inside the mirror, you didn't paint the situation. Actually, you've painted what you see in the mirror, and you're doing like there's something missing. If you want to paint the situation, you have to put on the canvas you, the mirror, and you painting you, etc. And hence you have to also include a third one, which will paint the three, and the fourth one which will paint the four, etc. And you have this kind of never-ending. Take it with photography. If you want to photograph this and photograph yourself photographing that, you need another one photographing you photographing that, and the third one photographing the three, which leads to this kind of infinite regression. Take it with visuals. Can you look at yourself looking? You can. You need someone to see you look at something, and if you want to get the situation, you need another one that looks at the three, and you have this kind of never-ending regression. Now, the thing is that, let's suppose you want to get this excessive thing. You want to put your hand on it, this kind of thing that always evades, when you want to capture the whole of the situation inside the painting. What can you do? Velasquez, what he does here is that he starts playing on these excessive paradoxes. He shows you that if you want to see this image here, which is the meninas, this image here cannot be exactly this one, because as you can see in this one, Velasquez is outside of the painting. So if Velasquez wants to paint himself painting, he cannot paint himself painting in this dimension here, because he would be behind the canvas copying what he is seeing. So to see himself, either he sees himself or he paints himself, but you cannot have both. This is the first paradox. But there's another problem here. The problem is that this painting here stands for what? This painting that you see here stands for what? You see, you have this painting that you see, and you have the painting of Velasquez that we see here from the back. Now, what do you think is he painting on the painting which is inside the painting?
The royal couple.
Is he painting the royal couple or the infant with her court? Because some critique says that if you look at this rectangle here, you see that rectangle, the head of Velasquez, the head of the nun here and the servant here. If you look at this rectangle, you have a cup. You see here is a cup. And usually this is a classical composition where the infant is the center of the painting. So you have a lot of theories here. So one of the theories is that actually he's painting this scene on that painting. This is possibility one. Possibility two, some say, well, no. He's painting the royal couple because, you see, they must be standing here, the royal couple. And he's painting the royal couple, which you see here in the mirror, on that painting. So I hope you're getting these kind of tensions.
I don't get why he would be painting the court.
He would be painting the court because some analysis says that this composition here, where this Meninas is looking at the infant and this one is looking here, this kind of composition where people are placed as looking at the main subject is usually the way we paint royalties.
But the painter is not facing his
Yes, yeah, but you could have here, they say, a mirror. And actually he's painting what he's seeing in the mirror. So if you want a third interpretation, you have a lot of interpretations on that, but I'm just giving you the feel of this way to give you the ease. Another interpretation is that here you have a mirror actually, because if you put the lines of perspective, you have two lines of perspective. There's one that comes here in front of the infant here, the daughter, and you have another one that comes somewhere here, which is more on the side of the king. So some interpretation thinks that there is a mirror here, in this rectangle here, you see, that comes up to the head and somewhere here. And actually the royal couple is here, and Velasquez is painting this scene. But there's a third interpretation, it's my favorite. Actually he's painting this painting because if you look at the perspective exactly here, this is where you have to stand to look at the painting. And if you stand in front of it, actually you will see the back of the spectator to the painting. Actually, if now you go to the Prado, you see people standing in front of the painting, you see here a back, and the back is facing the mirror. And actually, this would be the accurate image, meaning with the spectator, you get what he was really painting. And here you see how he's able to get out of the painting in a way. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. If you look at someone looking at the painting, you would have the configuration of what Velasquez was looking at. By placing the spectator in the place of the king, you get the parameters. And actually what he's painting, Velasquez, is the spectator here with the court, which is that painting. So that painting becomes a kind of mirror itself. Now, all of these kind of flips is just to show you that if you want to paint this extra dimension, you can build this kind of machine. It's like a visual machine where the spectator stands here. He's supposed to be reflected like the king inside the mirror back there. And actually, he's being painted by Velasquez inside the painting, which is inside the painting. This includes this kind of arrow that gets outside of the painting. I hope it's clear. So you can read about all the little details about that. You have it summarized in the notes, and you have it in Les mots et les choses, The Order of Things, where Foucault analyzes Las Meninas, where he shows you all the possibilities of that thing. Because there's more. This guy here is called Velasquez too. It's a guy from the court who's he's not Velasquez. His name is also Velasquez, and he seems to be looking at the painting. So from the door, he's seeing what Velasquez is not seeing, because Velasquez is looking at the spectator, and you have this kind of doubling of Velasquez. Yeah.
How is the link between this painting and the power and the...
Yeah, the link is that here you see that you have a point of excess that organizes this visual construction. This point of excess is the place of the king, which is also the place of the spectator, and it's an invisible point. You don't see it. Actually, everyone is looking here, and you don't see what they are looking at, but you see that this point is organizing the whole thing. This is on the level of narration. On the level of the visual itself, the excess cannot be portrayed. Really, like this over dimensions that organizes itself cannot be part of the visual. In the same way that you have the blinding sun, the king that is invisible but that you feel him all around the place, etc., etc. So it's a problem of excess. It's a problem of excess in this case. This very specific case, it's really like how to get the excess, how to portray that there's an excess in this pictorial organization. In architecture, the excess is captured in the facade, in the what you call the elevations. If you look at Versailles, all the work of Versailles, of the architect in Versailles, is really how to make a magnificent facade. Because this is going to show you the pompous, excessive power of the owner of this castle, which is something that is going to disappear in modern architecture. You see, in modern architecture, you don't care about the facade. On the contrary, you want it to be made of glass and you want the light to come in. It's not a surface that is going to be that on which the light bounces and is illuminated by the light, with all the shadows and the statues and the little tricks that the architects used to do, like all of this work on having a sculpted facade. Instead of that, with Gropius, Le Corbusier, and people like that, they're going to say, tear down this facade. And when you hear that, it means that something really changed. You feel that power doesn't need anymore to be present in this kind of ostentatious, in architecture ostentatoire, like ostentatious architecture, where we're going to show you the richness and power of the governing class. When the light starts getting in, you understand that things are changing. So there's a castle in France, I forgot the name. They started to introduce light inside the castle. This is 19th century architecture. People felt that this is new and something is changing. They felt that now light is getting in. You walk in Versailles, you don't have light inside. You have some light only on the galleries, on the external, but you don't. The rooms are aligned like that, and you have room after room with a window. You don't really have this kind of light getting inside the building, like when you will see later in industrial big factories, where you have huge windows, or in the Bauhaus, where you have these curtain walls. All of these things will come later, and they will be the reflection of another form of power. So to conclude, I hope you got this first figure. To conclude, this figure has a counterpart, which is the figure itself is harsh light and and the focal point, which is absolutely invisible and dark, this is the figure itself. Now, there's another figure that always comes with the ideal figure. This figure is the ideal, the sovereign, the sun, all of these, the eidos, all of these are really one constellation. You have another figure which is always like the shadow of that constellation, not the dark point, like another configuration, which is the configuration of the simulacra, the simulacrum, or what you call simulation. This is not simulation. Simulation is when you're going to simulate the idea instead of implementing in reality, or as much as you can, the idea. I'll just give you an example, just so you get it. If you take the Parthenon in Greece, this was the nightmare of Plato, because, usually buildings, in a Platonic sense, they have to, as much as they can, embody the ideal proportion, which is 1/7, the golden ratios and stuff like that. So you have to do your building really by really carving in stone and cutting the stone in a way that you have a real proportion. If you measure the column, it should be 7:1, really not visual. Why the Parthenon is the nightmare of Plato? Because the Parthenon, which is the masterpiece of Greek architecture, actually the Parthenon didn't build real proportions, they built simulated proportion. What does it mean? That they make it fake. This way they included, not in this way, in the other way, they included the distortion of the viewer, not the place of the viewer. They really included that. If you are here, you will look at it. If you make real proportions, it will not look really proportions. So what should you do? You should actually make the columns higher, and when you go up, you have to open them, because in perspective they have a tendency to close down, and you have to make them more bulky somewhere in the middle, and all kinds of distortions that are going to make it look perfect, even though in itself it's absolutely imperfect. So of course Plato didn't like that at all, because for him, you have to make it as such proportionate, but not looking proportionate. Now, I hope you get this difference. Now, this difference, if you take our stories here, if you take someone like Beccaria and Servan and Bentham, now these are jurists from the 18th century, which are called the jurists of the Enlightenment. Voltaire was one of them. Voltaire was a great supporter of Servan and Beccaria. Beccaria is an Italian jurist that introduced the juridical reforms. And the juridical reforms were reforms that went against the torture the torture organization. And Beccaria, Servan, including Bentham, they used to say, but instead of torturing these people, it would be much better if you simulate torture rather than do the torture. I hope now you're getting the relay. No. So I say, until Beccaria, Servan, they used to really cut the guy into pieces. Really. He used to scream and you see the blood. Now, Beccaria, Servan, and all of these reformers of justice, they said, you know what, these are part of the bourgeoisie. So here you feel that there's a mutation happening. So how did this mutation begin? They used to advise the king and the lawyers of the king, tell them, listen, your juridical system is not that efficient. You know what? Because when you do these scaffold rituals, people get most of the time angry. Sometimes you have riots. When they are torturing the guys, the people start insult the king and the butcher of the king. And sometimes you had real riots where the people attack the soldiers, etc. Third, is very costly. To do a butchering scene, you have to bring the priests, the army, the musicians, and the aristocracy, and it's really like it's too costly. And it doesn't capture small criminality. Small criminality meaning if someone steals something, you can't put a scaffold and torture him to death. Usually the scaffold is reserved to exceptional crimes, like if you are the chief of an army of bandits, if you kill your father, if you blaspheme, if you burn a cross, or you attempt to the life of the king. These are crimes that are good for the... so usually it's murder and above. So for all of these reasons, Beccaria, Servan, and company, They thought that they need a new model of justice that can comply with the beginning of capitalist society. Capitalist society, you have factories, production, you have people who steal, who don't come to work, who don't honor their contract. And they were saying, come on, we can't now, each time someone steals or doesn't honor his contract, put a scaffold and chop his hands and his head and stuff like that. So for that reason, they emitted this kind of motto, which is that of the humanization of the punishment. Now, I hope you understand that in Foucault, when you hear humanization of punishment, it doesn't mean that we are becoming more human. Actually, because the bourgeoisie wants to take power, this juridical system doesn't fit with its way of managing things. So for them, they need to humanize punishment, meaning they need to make it more diffuse, less costly, a system which is legally, the legal and the punishing system must be able to comply with small criminality, contracts, etc. This is why they moved into another form of justice. In the beginning, they proposed the theater in the beginning, meaning when they were still under the king, before 89, they proposed that instead of the scaffold, let's make a theater. What is a theater? They called it the theater of crime, the theater of punishment. They say, if you want to save money, and you want to impress the population at low cost, the thief, the criminal, the adultery person, or whoever you want to deal with, put him on a scaffold, but which is not a scaffold, and let him play his crime on the scaffold. This way he would be humiliated. So it's a moral order. So let's suppose you like duels. If you like duels, I read you this one on duels, this way you get a bit the idea. This is on duels. How should you punish those who make duels? Private duels whose origin lay in the very anarchy of the laws arose from this need for others' esteem. You know, duel, when you throw a duel against someone, meet me in the morning and I'll shoot you or you shoot me. Why do you do that? Because it comes from your esteem is being hurt. This is when you throw a duel. So duels are alleged to have been unknown in the ancient world, perhaps because the ancients did not foregather in temples, in theaters, and with their friends, warily forearmed, or perhaps because the duel was a common and ordinary spectacle which enslaved and debased gladiators gave to public, and free men disdained to be considered and called gladiators because of their private combats. Attempts to put a stop to this custom by decrees of death against those who engage in duels have been in vain, for it is founded on something which some men fear more than death. Deprived of the esteem of others, the man of honor sees himself doomed to become either a merely solitary being, which would be an insupportable condition for a sociable man, or the butt of insults and slander, whose combined effect would be greater than the danger of punishment. So if you ridicule this man who likes to do duels, it's even worse than killing. So why is it that ordinary people, for the most part, do not duel as noblemen do? It is not just that they are unarmed, but because the need for others' esteem is less common among the humble classes than it is among those who, being exalted, regard each other with greater circumspection and jealousy. It is not useless to repeat what others have written, which is that the best way to prevent this crime is to punish the aggressor, that is, the person whose action caused the duel, and to absolve him who, through no fault of his own, was compelled to defend what the current laws do not guarantee, his good name, and had to show his fellow citizens that he fears only the laws and not men. So what Bentham is saying is that if you want to stop the duels, if you read the rest of his, is that you need to humiliate the guy who throws the duels. How do you do that? You put him on a scaffold, he said, And you make him wear, in the text, you make him wear like a donkey hat, and you put him there in front of everyone to be insulted by everyone on this theater. And he has to do that for a while. And this is how you really take away his honor instead of torturing him. I don't know if you've seen the Scarlet Letter, the A, by Strom, 1925, the movie. There's a remake, you see. So it's a woman who has an affair with, I think, a priest, and actually the community is going to humiliate her. You see, humiliation is not torture. It's a kind of variation on torture. Usually it appears in societies where people know each other more or less, or you can have a public recognition of who is doing what. And really the society of punishment, which comes after the society of torture and before the society of discipline. It's this kind of intermediate society where Bentham says it's better to simulate the punishment, meaning if you make a criminal dress with, Bentham says, with animal skins, and you color his face with disgusting colors, and you put on him blood, and you put lighting on the stage where at night he looks really awful, this will affect the people's imagination more than if you kill him. So simulating punishment, if you have the right optical tricks, could be more efficient than doing the punishment as such. And this is what you call simulation. Really, you have to play it, you have to show it. In Foucault, you have a very nice text about the gardens of crime. Now, what is the garden of crime? One of these juridical theoreticians back then, he used to say, you know what, if you take a garden, let's say, I don't know, Luxembourg or Sanaia or any garden you have a garden in the city, instead of having just trees, you put there criminals. What are they doing? You put them in cages or on a theater, and on the theater they play their crime and they repeat what they did, and they are confronted to the people, they teach them a lesson, and everyone sees what is crime and what can crime leads to. If you want another manifestation of that, is what you used to call la chaîne des forçats. You know, the chain is like the criminals used to be transported, but not in dark cars, not like we do today. You put them in a car and no one sees them when you transport criminals. They used to make them walk, and while they're walking in the city, everyone can insult them, throw tomatoes on them, and they insult back. And this way you see crime in the city, this kind of manifestation and lesson of crime. So I'm trying to tell you is that this is a new configuration, which is the simulation. Simulation, you are going to really humiliate the criminal. Sometimes they kill him too, but the target is to humiliate. And why you need to humiliate? Because if you see him humiliated, you don't want to be humiliated, and this enchains your thought. And this is the birth of ideology, as we will see. Ideology begins with David Hume, Bentham, and these people. And what does ideology consist of? It consists of saying, instead of chaining people with terror, let them being chained with associations of ideas. So you have this science called the science of the association of ideas, which you had a branch called the ideologues, whose job was to study how ideas associate together. Les idéologues, the ideologists, they used to think that when you think of something, you have to think of the punishment that is more painful in your imagination than the criminal act you want to do. This is how you would be prevented from doing the criminal act. For example, if I tell you, if you steal, I'm going to make you work for 10 years in a mine in order to pay back 100 times what you have stolen, for you as an imaginary association, it's more painful than being whipped 10 times and that's it. I hope you're getting the difference. So here you have really a kind of image that's going to prevent you from. Bentham gives the example of the death sentence. If you kill, if I tell you I will just hang you or chop your head off, it's not that painful. But if I tell you that I'm going to make you work awful things for the rest of your life, before killing someone, you think twice. Why you think twice? Because during the day, in this kind of ideal society, you would have seen a guy who killed someone working, cleaning, I don't know, the sewages and being humiliated by everyone. You see him enchained and doing that for the rest of his life. So you don't want to end up like him, you don't steal. Okay, I hope you're getting this kind of variation on that. So here you really move into simulating rather than implementing. If you take today Facebook, we are moving back into a simulation of humiliation control. What we call public shaming on the electronic medias is this. Public shaming, you do something a little bit disgusting and you end up being publicly shamed on the social media. This is how you control yourself. So it's not that it's a form that it's a principle that's going to take a new form with the electronic devices, but it's already there. If you have a small community where you can have your image tarnished, you control yourself via the love of your image. And Burroughs, as we will see, is going to work a lot on that. Like, I don't want my image to be cast. I don't want to look like a disgusting idiot and stuff like that. So I control myself because I want to preserve my image. You have this today a lot. Public shaming, campaigns of humiliation, all of these things are part of this kind of technology of power. I will let you do something by threatening you with that image. I don't know if it's a hazard, if this is simulation and that is simulation, but there's an echo between these two. So I will read you a text by Diderot. This way you get what I'm talking about. So this is Diderot talking about theater. What truth for theater? You see, Diderot is really like the contemporary of Voltaire, Beccaria, all these people. He's really like part of this. This is what Foucault calls the short century. It's 1720, 1789. It's really like 70 years. And then it disappeared. This punishment society that you see in the Scarlet Letter, but in also many movies where you have these rituals of punishment, not of humiliation, not of torture, which is a bit different.
But humiliation is also like a punishment. It's not simulation.
Yeah, it's simulation. Why? Because you don't do it.
You do it. You oblige this body, this criminal, to wear this color.
But you don't chop her into pieces. That's the difference.
I know, but it's like still punishment.
So let's call it punishment prime. Can we call it prime? Because it's the same. You see, it's not the word. The words are okay. Which means, okay, this is also punishment, of course, but you have punishment torture and punishment humiliation. No, it's not a problem. So is that what I'd like you to see is there's a real difference between physically confronting someone and chopping him into pieces. This is a form of punishment. And you have another form of punishment, which is humiliation, which is a form where actually you degrade him as an image, as a persona, more than physically, like removing his tongue, taking away his hand and stuff like that. And I know that it's confusing. You see, that if you look at these, they look the same. This is the scold wife. You see? Now, is this torture or punishment? This is for women who talk a lot. So you have this version, and these usually make noise like ring, ring. You have.
How old is this?
Huh?
How old?
This is the 18th century. It's not a long time ago. This is 1750. You had these. This is scold wife. You see, it's a mask where you have a little piece of steel that enters the mouth. It doesn't hurt, but doesn't let you speak, and you look like an idiot. Like your husband can put this on your head because you gossip too much, and it's a humiliation. You see, in that case, the woman still lives her life. It's like the Scarlet Letter. It's very humiliating, but she's there with her letter on her. No one talks to her. No one looks at her because. She's a whore and stuff like that, but she's not being butchered. Now, This, on the other hand, it really explodes your mouth. Like it's not, and this is for the condemned. Now, on the other hand, if you look, this is called wife, and these are punishment masks. You know, the pig, the donkey. You know, all of these ridiculous masks that you can make people who didn't behave well wear them. It's really like Facebook before the letter. Right? It's like. It's really like how to humiliate someone. You really like humiliate him publicly by making him wear these things. You see, here it's a bit different. It's a theater. It's masks. It's costumes. So it's a bemol. Really, it's not very different, but it's in the same atmosphere, but a variation of it.
But I thought this was older than 18th century.
Yeah.
I thought it was in Middle Age. It was already.
Yeah.
Form of punition. I
Yeah.
think in Quasimodo's Disney,
Yeah.
they put him
Yeah.
in a public place and they throw him fruits. It's humiliation.
Yeah. So this is actually, these are recurrent. They appear in the Inquisition. You had it, and depending on the epoch, you have a resurgence of these things. I told you in Lebanon you have torture. Today you have humiliation on Facebook, so these reappear. I'm not saying that this is only Ancien Régime, but in our sequence, you had a moment, you had a peak of torture. It was followed by a peak of humiliation. You can tell me, yeah, but didn't they overlap? They did. But you have a peak. What does it mean? It means that if you take someone like Bentham, all of these people, they said, stop torturing, humiliate. So when you read in books, stop torturing, humiliate, you feel that they're trying to move the system of royal justice towards something else, but they can't just cut it and move away. So you have this kind of thing between the prison, which is what we know today. Today you have a justice relying on, conviction, juries, ADN tests and stuff like that. This is a modern justice. And you have the prison, work, prison, you pay while working in the prison, all of these things. Workshops in prison. This is disciplinary. In between, you had this moment of how can we get out of the and you always have these things. You have transitions between power where something is a bit bastards. It's a bit in between.
So it's thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot who convinced or realized that maybe like ideological or punishment is more effective than torture.
This is their theory. Yeah. You see, if you want to hold a population, let's hold them by their imagination and ideas rather than by their terror. Why they're saying that? Because they are from the bourgeoisie. You see that the bourgeoisie will be part of the people and governing the people, democracy. I feel that if you want to do that, you can't be terrorizing. Because what do you want from the people? You want them to consume, to produce, to feel that they are fine, while actually they are being exploited. So it's better if they are controlled with their imagination, really like ideology as we'll see it with advertisement, be it Stalin or the US, Coca-Cola, American, all of this begins in this kind of, let's put in their minds like values, moral values, hedonistic values, all kinds of images, and via these images they will be controlled. This begins really with this juridical reform, with the ideologue, with the ideologists. And the first step, of course, as Nietzsche says, you can't just leave a system like that. First, the system begins, as he says, masked, but not masked like that. Like he begins as if it's like the old system. And then you see that actually it's totally different. With time, you see that the step towards humiliation rather than torture is going to a place which is very, very different from torture and the like. Yeah.
But in Voltaire's mind, or maybe Beccaria, the aim was not only efficiency, it was there was also a bit humanistic of the motivation of this. This
is what they say. Foucault doesn't believe them. He's annoying. Foucault doesn't like the good nature of man. So I think it's clear in all the writing. When I tell him that things are happening because people are feeling bad about other people, he doesn't like that. Why? Because for him it doesn't work, really. Goodwill, good intentions, they don't work. For him what really works is power organizations. If you want to put people in a factory and make them work 8 hours a day, it's not your goodwill and good intentions that are going to do that. So this is why, even though a way to promote your new rules, as we hear until today, is to call for the good-heartedness of humanity, Bush says that to invade Iraq. It's not that. It's an old trick. It's not a trick. I'm not saying that he does it consciously or not. Like today, if you want to kill someone, you can't kill him by saying, I'm evil. You say, I'm doing it for the goodness for humanity, because he's evil. They did it with Nasser, they did it with Saddam. So each time you want to execute someone, you say he's Hitler or he's evil, and I'm doing it for humanity. So that's fine. If you take Zuckerberg, power always speaks like that. It's fascinating. If you take Zuckerberg, the guy of Facebook, he says, yeah, but I want to connect people, I want to bring people together, to make them live together. This is his intention, I'm sure. But he doesn't see that this is power. It's not up to his intention. He doesn't see that the NSA and the CIA and all of these organizations, they will let him do that project because it facilitates control, surveillance, and all kinds of maneuvers that will allow the implementation of power. So it's not that he's playing with power, it's rather power is playing with him. So you have many surfaces. You have a first kind of layer, which is that you speak, I want to be good, I'm a good person, I'm trying to do goodness for humanity. This, as we'll see how pernicious this is. And then you don't see that what you're really doing is you're implementing a new form of power. The same story happens with Beccaria and these jurists. They could be filled with good intentions. They don't see that this kind of humanization of the punishment is actually preparing the ground for bourgeois governance and bourgeois criminality and bourgeois exploitation. They are really like serving exploitation before the letter. So I just read you this to get the simulation thing and how it appears in a theory of theater. So Diderot says, réfléchissez un moment ce qu'on appelle au théâtre être vrai. Est-ce y montrer les choses comme elles sont en nature? Aucunement. Le vrai en ce sens ne serait que le commun. Qu'est-ce que donc le vrai de la scène? C'est la conformité des actions, des discours, de la figure, de la voix, du mouvement, du geste avec un modèle idéal imaginé par le poète et souvent exagéré par le comédien. You have his ideal. Voilà le merveilleux, ce modèle n'influe pas seulement sur le ton, il modifie jusqu'à la démarche, jusqu'au maintien. De là vient que le comédien dans la rue ou sur la scène sont deux personnages si différents qu'on a à peine à les reconnaître. La première fois que je vis Mademoiselle Clairon, chez elle, je m'écriai tout naturellement « Ah, mademoiselle, je vous croyais toute la tête plus grande. » Une femme malheureuse est vraiment malheureuse, pleure et ne vous touche point. Il y a pis, c'est qu'un trait léger qui la défigure vous fait rire. C'est qu'un accent qui lui est propre dissonne à votre oreille, vous blesse. C'est qu'un mouvement qui lui est habituel vous montre sa douleur ignoble et maussade. C'est que les passions outrées sont presque toutes sujettes à des grimaces que l'artiste sans goût copie servilement, mais que le grand artiste évite. Nous voulons qu'au plus fort des tourments, l'homme garde le caractère d'homme, la dignité de son espèce. Quel est l'effet de cet effort héroïque de distraire de la douleur et la tempérer? Nous voulons que cette femme tombe avec décence, avec mollesse, et que ce héros meure comme le gladiateur ancien au milieu de l'arène, aux applaudissements du cirque, avec grâce, avec noblesse, dans une attitude élégante et pittoresque. Qu'est-ce qui remplira notre attente? Sera-ce l'athlète que la douleur subjugue et que la sensibilité décompose, ou l'athlète académisé qui se possède et pratique les leçons de la gymnastique en rendant le dernier soupir? Le gladiateur ancien, comme un grand comédien ainsi que le gladiateur ancien, ne meurent pas comme on meurt sur un lit, mais sont tenus de nous jouer une autre mort pour nous plaire, et le spectateur délicat sentirait que la vérité nue, l'action dénuée de tout, serait mesquine. Okay, I hope you get the idea, which means the more you do it artificially, the better it is. If you read the rest of the text, Diderot is saying, if you want to play pain, do not be in pain. So if you really want to show someone that you are suffering on theater, you should simulate that pain and not show it, not be in pain and express pain really. And his whole theory of theater is a theory of simulation. How to then simulate, really like reconstruct pain rather than embody what pain looks like in reality. This is, if you want, the realm of simulation. Now, it's at this time that you had the whole reflection also on lighting. Because to light the scenes of these theaters of crime, theaters of simulation, they start using, les feux de la rampe and all kinds of lighting system, which would be closer to Caravaggio if you've seen Caravaggio. You know Caravaggio is this kind of chiaroscuro. The light moves into a configuration of the clair-obscur rather than the éclatant and the blinding spot. Okay, I hope you're getting this difference. You see, so in this regime, you move now from the sun into the candle. If you want two images, you had the sun, which is like a radiant sun, one center dominating all, éclat de supplice, and then now you have the fire, which is a local source of light that projects shadows and partial lights, and these shadows and light can express terror better than the, let's say, the dominant light. I hope this is more or less clear. Okay, so that's it for today. So just for you to get a bit, so you don't need to worry about the material because I'm going to invite you to the box. You can send me an email on @gmail.com. So you send me an email just saying add me to the box, okay? I'll send you an invitation, gmail.com. So I'll invite you to the box. In the box you have the notes, which is a document. It's a bit long, but it's okay. It's a document where you have everything I say written, and you have more. So you have really everything I say with more written in the document. I will also put a folder where you have documents like the images and text that we read here and all of these things. You will have them in the box. And maybe a document of readings if you wish to read, and the books of Foucault and the books of Deleuze. So you have and the audio recordings. So I'm recording, you'll have the audios. If you're lost, if you are in the traffic jam, you want to revise or you want to just see what was that, you can put play and I start speaking. So what else would you have? Yeah, you have all of these things. So you don't need to worry about the content of the material. I think, and you have in the notes. You have at the end of each chapter readings. I will give you this document too. You have readings and audiovisual stuff and movies. Okay? Now today, if you want, you click on Claude Duval. You see Claude Duval, he's a British cartouche. He's like Cartouche but in Great Britain. You click on that, you see his life and what he used to do. These are videos on Claude Duval. You have a movie, Mel Gibson, Braveheart, for punishment, torture, and the sovereign regime. You've seen that movie. Not all the movies are masterpieces, but they give you an idea of what is going on. So at the end of each chapter, you have a list of... usually, I'm covering in each session 2 chapters. It's around 20 pages. So today we did Sovereign Torture and Society of Punishment. Because if you read these as they are summarized here, you'll have a very good idea of what I'm talking about. These are literally summaries from Foucault, so I'm not inventing or anything. I'll just summarize and put here. So if you don't want to read the whole book, you read the summaries. If you want to read the whole book, which is even better, you read the book. You read. We will cover almost 3/4 of Foucault's books, so really like almost all Foucault and all its aspects in relation to the image and these things. So I will also put the program of the year, and we'll cover at the end some of Deleuze's theory of desire and sexuality as it appears in Anti-Oedipus, because Foucault wrote a lot on sexuality and power and sexuality. We'll do that package with Deleuze and Georges Bataille. So you have a lot of Foucault, and then the theory of desire with Deleuze. At the beginning, you have the list of all the references, movies, etc. You see, example here, the first 2 lessons, you can see audiovisuals, readings, etc. Okay? That's it. For you'll have to do a number of papers for your exams, and that's all. Okay? It's clear. You have questions? No?